Hi, welcome everyone to a new live stream here at Anabaptist World. My name is Juan Moya. I have here a very special guest, Sarah Augustine. Hi, Sarah. How are you doing tonight?
Hi there. Good to see you. I'm doing
Yeah.
great.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone who's connected online through our Facebook and YouTube channels. We're excited to have Sarah Augustine. She's kind of like a legend here in the in the Mennonite and world. Tonight we're highlighting a columnist, Sarah Augustine, a Pueblo Tewa woman. She lives with her family in White Swan, Washington. Is that correct, Sarah?
That's right.
She's the executive director of the Dispute Resolution Center of Yakima and Kittitas counties, and is a member of Seattle Mennonite Church. She's also a co-founder of Suriname Indigenous Health Fund and executive director of Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery Coalition. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us once again. I know you're busy. You're a busy woman, so thank you and welcome here to this live stream of Anabaptist World.
It's such a pleasure to be here, and thanks for offering the opportunity to talk about the book, So We and Our Children May Live. I wrote that together with co-author Sherry Hostetler. Sherry and I co-founded the coalition to dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, and we also co-host the Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery podcast.
Mhm.
So it's a pleasure to get to talk about the book that's coming out October 31st. And
Okay.
so
Well, Sarah, take it away. We have a presentation on what all goes in the book, and we're excited to for our viewers to learn a little bit more about your work. So yeah, please take it away. Give us a brief of what you do for those of uh, people streaming, uh, who you are, what are you currently doing, and what do you hope to promote with this book and with what you do in your work.
yeah, you bet. So this book is to bring people to the movement. And what movement am I talking about? Well, it's a decolonization movement and the movement for the rights of Indigenous peoples. And so at the coalition, we're calling on the church to engage in dismantling the doctrine of discovery, which is a body of law and policy that was put in place by the church and has led to the enslavement and oppression of Indigenous people around the world to this day. And so I have the pleasure of having some slides tonight. Thank you for being willing to share the slides, and
Okay.
just go
Yeah.
ahead and
And
start.
I think we got it. Okay, there we go.
Okay, great. So if you could go on to the first slide, this is really the idea of that we're talking about in this book. The first of all, I should tell you from the coalition's point of view, the reason to write a book is to really get people thinking about and talking about these issues in terms of how the church can be part of confronting the climate crisis and the crisis that faces all of creation as a result of an extractive mindset. So I'm going to just start with challenging you to think about the world maybe in a different way. And this is a way that I have learned from the elders who have spent time with me, teaching me how to look through an Indigenous cosmology. And that is that we live in a closed system of mutual dependence. So, what the heck is a closed system? Well, it's a physical system where there are no new inputs or outputs. So, if you think about the world as a closed system, there's no access to new soil or new water or new air. It's a closed system. And also by the same token, there's nowhere to put waste. Whatever we create is here with us, and whatever we deplete, there's no access to those new systems of life. And so if we're in a closed system, we are also in a system of mutual dependence, which means that everything that we do impacts every other being or creature on the earth. What every one of us does impacts every other. So this is really from an indigenous cosmology. And from that point of view, that is reality. That's the reality that we are a part of. And the next slide, please. That's not really what I learned in the context that I grew up in and I was educated in the dominant culture. What I've learned from the dominant culture is that progress is linear in time, and you demonstrate your progress through accumulation. So I can demonstrate my success by having a nice house and having a nice car, financial security, which would be a retirement fund, my ability to send my offspring to college. All of these kinds of things are evidence of my success. Also, a number of degrees, sort of the achievements that I've amassed. All of that demonstrates progress, which is linear. It really starts with my birth and it ends at my death. And so in this view of reality, the earth is then a set of raw resources, and extraction takes place in service to progress. So progress is sort of on a linear stream. And if we want to make progress, we're going to use the earth as a set of raw resources to consume. And that runs completely counter to the worldview that I have learned from my elders, which is that we live in a closed system of mutuality. We're mutually dependent on each other, and we all are dependent on the systems of life that are not commodities or resources to exploit, but the systems that we depend on to live and that all life is dependent upon. So next slide, please. All right, so extraction is the basis, or extractive logic is the basis of our current economic system, and therefore sort of the basis of our culture. And it's rooted in the concept of dominion or domination. And it's justified by the need for perpetual growth. So in our economy, we know we have to grow by an economy 3 to 5%, every year in order to have a healthy economy. And so we say a healthy economy, even though this kind of logic is absolutely depleting to the systems of life. In fact, extraction threatens every system of life on the earth through the pollution of air, water, and soil. So when I'm talking about extraction, I'm talking about obviously fossil fuels, extracting and then deploying those into the air and air systems, water systems, soil systems, but then also all other kinds of extraction as well. Minerals, heavy metals, the things that we need to build and run an economy. And so to have a healthy economy in this worldview, it demands that we deplete the very systems of life that we're dependent upon. And so what Sherry and I talk about in this book is we call this ecological overshoot, that we are consuming more of the resources than the earth can sustainably renew. Next slide, please. And so when we get to a situation like climate change is not just a crisis in itself, but it's evidence or is actually a symptom of ecological overshoot. And so what we try and do is come up with technological solutions to address those. And unfortunately, technological solutions will not heal creation or end climate change or dismantle oppressive systems. So if we think about, renewable energy, we think about solar panels and having solar panels, but solar panels are not renewable. The energy from the sun is renewable, but solar panels are replaceable. They are made from stuff that we extract from the earth, right? And so, so even those industries that are billed as renewable energy industries, they follow the logic of extraction, where they are consuming resources from the earth in order to produce products to fuel the economy. So accumulation and perpetual growth are the desired outcomes. And those outcomes are necessarily disruptive to the systems of life. Next slide, please. So also in the dominant culture, in the vision of the dominant culture, we depend on competition to get our needs met. And this idea that in a healthy economy, we have to compete with each other, and competition leads to innovation. And this leads to stratification into violent hierarchies and oppression. So we see things like the process of colonization, where the whole colonial project, there were people who came from Europe to the New World, what was billed the New World, and consumed and continued to consume raw resources to build progress, or this understanding of civilization through the lens of the dominant culture. And so that process, or that project of colonization, requires that there be this understanding of competition, where one group of people is going to dominate and subdue another, and all of life in pursuit of economic gain. Next slide, please. So many of you probably have heard me talk about the Doctrine of Discovery before and are probably sick of hearing about it, but I just say very briefly that the Doctrine of Discovery is a legal doctrine. You know, over time, some people have said, you know, Sarah, that's kind of a pretty dry title. You should think of something else to call it. But I think we're stuck with it because it is a legal doctrine that's embedded in our legal system in the United States. Through a series of Supreme Court decisions 100 years ago in 1823. The Doctrine of Discovery is the basis of many parts of our law, certainly law as it pertains to Native American people. So it defines, the Doctrine of Discovery defines reality for Indigenous peoples in the United States and beyond, and therefore it defines reality for everyone. So for those people who are the beneficiaries of the Doctrine of Discovery, it may feel invisible, but for those people who are oppressed by the Doctrine of Discovery, it's very tangible and relevant and obvious everywhere. The Doctrine of Discovery dictated that some people were worthy of owning and improving land, those people who were Christians or of European descent, and defined people who were not worthy of that, and to include Indigenous people. And this is embedded in our legal paradigm in the United States, and it's not going to fall away on its own. It has to be dismantled. Next slide, please. So in our work in the coalition, and I write about this quite a lot in this book, we affirm decolonization as a concrete process of expressing solidarity with Indigenous peoples. And actually, decolonization is a way of rooting out dominion and domination in our legal system, in our culture, and in the church. And so practices of decolonization help us to resist colonial norms of perpetual growth, accumulation, and extractive logic. And so I want to make the case here, the connection here, that decolonization is climate justice, and climate justice is decolonization. You cannot have one without the other. As our, what is it called, the green transition shows that we have this green transition, it has a lot of support, and that green economy is still based on an extractive logic that says, yes, in order to stop using as many fossil fuels, we're going to switch to extracting lithium and copper and other heavy metals so that we can create solar panels. And so it so happens that those resources are on Indigenous people's lands, and that Indigenous people's bodies and communities are being contaminated in order to mine those things. So our Anabaptist faith calls on us to be witnesses of peace. And our commitment to simple living provides us concrete actions for resisting the norms of perpetual growth and accumulation and extractive logic. So we have these practices already embedded in Mennonite culture. Simple living, which is a commitment to the peace stance, right? Not consuming more than our share, living gently on the earth, so that those people who are vulnerable, and so that creation itself is able to be renewed and is not objectified or being exploited. Next slide, please. So decolonization is not symbolic. It's not a metaphor. It actually means, this is a dictionary definition, relinquishing control of a subjugated people. Which, how do we relinquish control of a subjugated people? So in the United States, in the context where I live and work, I would consider Indigenous people to be a subjugated people. And that means to identify, challenge, and restructure or replace assumptions, ideas, values, and systems and practices that reflect a colonizer's dominating influence. So this means decolonization is giving up control. And this is kind of an interesting position to be in, because lots of people are in the dominant culture. People who are historic beneficiaries of the doctrine of discovery will say, what can I do? And want to get into the front of doing things, which is good. And the thing that you can do is follow Indigenous peoples' campaigns, right? You can follow the leadership of Indigenous peoples and other vulnerable peoples. And I think that giving up power in decision-making is a hard thing to do when you've been a beneficiary historically of structural injustice or legal injustice that defines the way that we live in our culture and our world. It's hard to step back from that authority and power. So sovereignty is affirming Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination. So their right to control what's going on in their own lands, in their own communities, among their own people. Land return is another really important part of decolonization. It's returning traditional lands to Indigenous peoples. And also challenging the notion of private property. So a lot of people get kind of afraid at this point and say, oh, I can't move out of my house. And I think we don't have to start on that level. We can talk about national parks, federally held land, state held land. There are multiple dimensions to land return. And we also have to take seriously and engage in concrete ways in decolonizing Christianity. Christianity was really the vehicle of colonization in the United States and Canada. It was the mechanism to justify whole-scale removal of Indigenous peoples from their lands, war, and the complete annihilation of Indigenous peoples. Christianity was really used as the basis for doing that. And some of the justifications remain in mainstream Christianity and our mainstream theologies. And so it's our, as Christians, as part of the Christian church, it's our job to decolonize our own words, our own places of worship, our own ways that we think about and practice domination. Next slide, please. So from my point of view, and many of you have probably heard me say this before too, if we look at Jesus' mandate as he describes it in Luke chapter 4, so these are really the first words in his ministry after he comes out of being tempted in the desert, and he goes to the temple in his own hometown, and he reads the scroll from the prophet Isaiah. And he says, the Spirit of God is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. And he's really clear about what that good news is, to set the oppressed free, to free the captive, to provide sight to the blind, and to announce the year of our Lord's favor, or Jubilee, which is a just reorganization of human systems. And so, as Anabaptists, this is really our clear call to engagement in justice, including decolonization. And that is good news for the poor. Next slide, please. Okay, well, I want to tell you what I am asked to tell you by a publisher, which is to encourage you to consider pre-ordering So We and Our Children May Live, Following Jesus and Confronting the Climate Crisis on Amazon. So why pre-order on Amazon? The reason is because it moves the book up in rankings so additional audiences will be able to see it. So as I said before, writing a book is not about selling a book. It's about pulling people into the movement. And so we're constantly working to do that. One thing I want to share with you, next slide, please, is an event that we are hosting on November 4th. I shouldn't say we're hosting it. We've been invited to collaborate with the Apache Stronghold in Oak Flat, which is near Tucson, Arizona. We have been invited to come to a day of prayer on November 4th, where we join together with the leaders of the Apache Stronghold in praying for transformation. And so I want to invite you to consider going there. If you want to learn more about this event, you can go to our website, which is at dismantlediscovery.org/NOV4. That's NOVFOUR. Or if you just go to our website, you'll see the landing page there. And so I want to tell you a little bit more about it. Oak Flat is a sacred place to the Apache where they have prayed for creation in the world for untold generations. And the U.S. Congress has agreed to transfer this land through a land exchange to Resolution Copper. This is via a bill that was passed in 2014. And this will become, Oak Flat will become the largest copper mine in North America. They will blow up a mountain and create a crater that is 2 miles across and 10 stories deep. It will take more than 1 million gallons to get that ore up to the surface, just to get the ore up to the surface in a desert environment, an environment without enough water. And so the Apache Stronghold are standing up for their sacred space, and they're inviting us Christians to come and pray with them. So there are 3 things you can do if you're interested in being part of this. You can go to Oak Flat and join us. You can reach out to us and schedule a prayer vigil in your own community, or a series of events where you're elevating this within your own community, and we'll help you do that. Or you can even sign up to be part of persistent and ongoing prayer. We're hoping to have 24-hour prayer coverage around this event. And I want to say what Wensler Nossi has told me. He's the leader of the Apache Stronghold, and he said, we are not praying for the preservation of Oak Flat. We're praying for transformation for all of us and for creation itself. And he has asked us to pray for forgiveness for what we have done to the earth, and for the damage caused by our economic systems, and also to pray for healing. So I want to just give you an opportunity to engage with us in this campaign. Look forward to seeing you there. Thank you. And that ends my slides.
Thank you, Sarah, once again for joining us. Thank you for sharing a little bit about what you do. Very important work that you guys are doing. And I have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. Now that we're done with the first part of the presentation, and I want to remind people again that if they want to ask Sarah a particular question, please feel free to leave those comments either here in Facebook or in YouTube, and we'll try to get those questions to Sarah. But Sarah, one of the questions that I had, since you've been with Anabaptist World linked with Anabaptist World for a while, how did you first connect with us? What was the story behind behind that?
Oh gosh. Okay. How did I first connect with Anabaptist World? Well, I actually pursued you all pretty mightily back when you were still the Mennonite. Let's see how many years ago that was. At first, we were really just trying to get an article published, and you did. You partnered with us, and you published several of our articles. I think this would maybe be the first one would maybe been in 2014, and maybe in 2015, and then I was invited to write a large article, and that article was called "Balancing Power Means Giving Up Power," and that was a wonderful. That was such a wonderful beginning of our relationship. And then you invited me, Anabaptist World invited me to become a columnist. And I've been a columnist, I think, a couple of years now. So I do a regular column, which is wonderful. It's a great opportunity to get to share. And then also some folks send me emails. They send me emails through the editor, Paul Schrag, and it's always great to hear when people have things to share.
And you're also part of the podcast.
And we have a podcast. That's right. You guys sponsor our podcast. Oh my gosh. Juan is our producer. So I thank you, sir, for that. And so we are just getting ready to release our third season. We took a year off, Sherry and I, so that we could write this book. And we're looking forward to publishing our third season with Anabaptist World, the third season of the Dismantling, the Doctrine of Discovery podcast.
And also, if for those who are tuning in right now, you're also welcome to go and follow Sherry and Sarah's podcast in all streaming platforms. It's also on our website, so look for Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery, and you'll find the last seasons there, and hopefully we'll hear a new season soon. So Sarah, you mentioned also you being a columnist at Anabaptist World. What feedback have you received from readers that you can remember? What has been the communication with the readers?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's been quite a lot of communication from readers. I've had readers who have reached out to me and said, gosh, I was a missionary in Navajo land, or I worked at the Hopi school, and some of the things you're saying really resonate with me, and I'd like to get involved. There are other readers who just want to correspond about theology and some of the issues that we're bringing up, and talking about liberation in another way, especially thinking about what it means to live in solidarity with the poor, with the oppressed. Most recently, I wrote an article. I think my last article, I don't remember when that was. I think it was a month ago or so, or maybe 2 months ago. I was writing about my diagnosis with MS. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And there were a couple of people that reached out to the editor and asked to have their information passed on to me to say, yeah, this has been really challenging, and I'm also living with a chronic disease. And so, I think one of the things that's really important to know for those of us who are really heavily involved in social justice movements is that if you're involved in a social justice movement, you're still a person. I'm still a mother, still raising a teenager, still a grandmother, and caring for my family, still living in this body. And it's important for us to share and be able to share the burdens together as we continue in the work and face new challenges. And so, it's just been wonderful to be able to hear from readers and to connect in a human way.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see writing for Anabaptist World relating to broader call to ministry? Because you have a lot of outputs, and now you have this channel through the Mennonite Christian community. How do you see this channel different from your other channels that you have? How do you connect your ministry through our readers?
Yeah, we had the opportunity to be on a variety of platforms, and we have chosen to participate in Anabaptist World. I'm a Mennonite woman, And it's a primary identity for me. And this is my home. This is the place that I live. My longtime pastor, Weldon Nisley, who's now retired, used to say, we live in the church and we go out into the world, not the other way around. We don't live in the world and come into the church. We live in the church and go out into the world. And I really think that's right. And that's part of this shared identity we have as Anabaptists and living in community and submitting to collective discernment and practicing yieldedness. And so, or those things that I've learned are part of being Anabaptist. And so I think it's been so important to me to be here because this is really home. And then we're going out into other platforms and doing other things. But this place, Anabaptist world, is really where we get to connect, where I feel I get to connect with my own people. So I'm an Indigenous woman and a Mennonite woman, and you all, those people who are readers of Anabaptist World, are my people.
Sarah, so I know that with a lot of this type of work, there's a lot of passion, and there's also a lot of resistance, right?
Yeah.
How do you deal or go about with resistance to the kind of work that you do? Because you're only sharing the good news,
Yeah. Right.
So tell us a little bit of maybe the struggles and what keeps you motivated to keep going.
Yeah. So there's plenty of resistance. There's resistance all around. There's resistance within the church and out in the world. And so, as many of you know, we're also constantly trying to dialogue with mining companies and with financial interests and investment agencies. And, and there is often, it's challenging work. And so a couple of things I'll say. One is that one of the things I've learned being a Mennonite in my early years, I'm a convert, as many of you know, early years of joining a Mennonite church, I was sent to mediation training, which is great. I'm so thankful for that, to become a mediator as a young woman, because then it really framed the rest of my career. I became a conflict professional over time. And when we're experiencing conflict and pushback, what I've learned is to step into that conflict, which is to say in relationship, trying to step deeper into relationship, really reaching into that conflict to find the human being or the human beings on the other side of it, rather than to dehumanize, to humanize, and to really build relationship. Because every conflict is an opportunity for growth, right? And for mutuality. And so that's really important. But, another thing is, sometimes when I hear pushback, I have to smile, because I have to say, don't tell me, tell the one who sent me. This is not my message. Say it to the one standing behind me, because it's very much true for me that I was called to this work. And I've written a lot about that, being called not only by Indigenous elders who've lifted me up and asked me to step in to the work, but also hearing my name called by the one, the great animator, the one who shows up every day to reanimate my body and my work. And so that call, I don't know, if you don't mind a little bit cheesy here, but there's a psalm that comes to mind, which is, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the creator of the heaven and earth, the heavens and earth. And I think about that because it's really true. And I think it's also important because from an Indigenous cosmology, high places are sacred places in many Indigenous communities. And just like Oak Flat, which is a mountain, and it is a sacred place where the Apache look up to those hills for the creator, to find contact with the creator. And so, that psalm is precious to me because I think, oh yes, I'm not alone. I am part of a whole unfolding process of creation. And what a gift, what a delight to be part of that. I'm not just part of a mundane story that's mine alone. I'm part of this story of creation unfolding, and I get to be part of that. And we are all part of it if we're able to acknowledge it.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And we want to remind the viewers here tonight that this coming issue of Anabaptist World, we're going to have a review of your book,
All
Sarah.
right.
So that's going to be great. I don't know if you have do you have the link to the Amazon to order the book?
Ooh, I don't have it right here. Oh my gosh, I should have that here.
Because while you look for it, Suzanne Ford, she asked us if do we have your permission to show these slides to groups, the slides that you share.
Yes.
And I'm guessing they would have to reach out to you to get the slides, or I don't know if
I'm
that's
okay if you put them in the show notes or however you do it. You bet.
yeah, maybe whoever's interested in contacting Sarah, maybe you can give them your email, Sarah, or the coalition's email.
Here it is. Let me get it to you right now.
Okay.
I'm dropping my email.
Okay.
It's Sarah at
Uh-huh.
dismantlediscovery.org.
Okay, let's.
And I'm also dropping it here in the chat.
Okay, so it's for those of you that are connected. Here's the link to Sarah's email, and also we're gonna live here in the chat the Amazon, so people can look for the book and pre-order it. It's definitely a topic of conversation. You know how we deal with our faith, how we put our faith in action, right? I think that's part of the message that you share, Sherry, and that's why it's so important that we live a faith that is active, that we can actually see changes in our communities, in our climates, in our families. So yeah, thank you again so much for sharing about your book, about your work, and I don't know if you have anything else you might want to add.
Well, Juan, it's just a pleasure to get to be here with you. We've worked together many or several years now, at least, and it's just great to get to be in this space together. And to the readers of Anabaptist World, it's a privilege to be in community with you. Thank you for spending your life energy and giving this time to hear my words. I recognize there are many things you could do with the Tuesday evening, and I want to thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you.
I thought, speaking of Tuesday evening, today is my birthday.
And happy
Yeah.
birthday, Juan. I'm so sorry. I should have said that. Happy birthday to Juan.
And before we scheduled this call, I completely forgot that it was my birthday, but it's okay. It's okay. We moved the celebration to a little time later on for tonight with the family. But it's been a pleasure, Sarah. Thank you so much for your time, for taking the time with Sherry also to write these important books. There are the links in the comments below. And if you want to reach out to Sarah, also please feel free to send her an email, and maybe she can get you those more information or the slides.
Okay.
But thank you, Sarah, and we'll stay in touch, and we look forward to the next season of Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery coming very soon.
Great. Good night, everybody.
Bye bye.